It's a promise that he will come again. It says, do you believe that? Do you believe that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord? Do you believe that what you will be cannot even be compared to what you are now? Throughout this weekend, I've been thinking a lot about this. I said, man, this may be true of you, but in my life, I don't think I talk enough about heaven. I definitely don't. I thought about preaching about heaven last year, but then I was like, nah, we're going to do something else. And then I was like, why is that? I remember teaching a class at a church and about systematic theology, and then we got to the end times, eschatology, Jesus coming back. And I remember telling them, honestly, because I was like, yo, I know Jesus is coming back. I know it could come anytime, any day, any hour, but functionally, I really want to be like, Jesus, there's some stuff I want to do before you come back. At that time, I was like, yo, I made sure I paid a lot of money for this wedding, so hold off. Let me just get over August. You can come back. And then she was praying and I said, okay, Lord, let Ezra come through. All good, 10 toes, 10. We good? Then you can come. But then I realized I love this world more than I love the idea of being with him. Well, today we finish our first-time caller, long-time listener series. We've been in it for the first half of the summer, and we've been saying, hey, we just want to spend a little bit of time answering some of the common questions that people have of the Christian faith. Today, we're going to dive right into our final topic and our final question that we want to ask and consider today, and that is simply this: do all roads lead to heaven? Don't all roads lead to heaven? In the day and age we live in right now, one of the most common things you hear about is tolerance. We want to tolerate everybody. We want to tolerate every perspective. We want to tolerate every viewpoint. And it makes you kind of feel like I'm being inclusive, I'm being inviting, I'm open to everything. But if the road in which you think you're taking never actually gets you to where you want to go, that's a problem. In the passage that was read for us by Levi, Shiloh, and Judah, we see something really, really important, and that is Jesus making one of the most controversial statements that he makes in the New Testament. The big idea for today is simply this: though our journeys to God may all begin on different roads, they must all end at the same destination. It has to end at Jesus. You may come from a different background. You may come from a different walk of life. You may come from a different experience, a different church experience, a different church denomination, no church. That doesn't matter. The journey that you began is not what's important, is the destination that you get to. And in the passage that we're looking at here in John 14, Jesus is making it really clear to us. He says, in order for you to get to where I want you to go, number one, you have to believe in the promise of Jesus. Secondly, you have to not only believe in the promise of Jesus, but you also have to believe in the exclusivity of Jesus. And then finally, you have to believe in the person of Jesus. Look at verse 1 through 3 in our first point. Believe in the promise of Jesus. He says, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go and prepare a place for you? If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. Today, if somebody wants to grab your attention by making a very controversial statement, typically what they'll do is they'll get in the front of a camera, they'll make sure the lighting is great, they'll press record, they'll put together a very catchy thumbnail for the YouTube so you can click on it, and then after a few introductory pleasantries, they'll dive in and start unloading all the controversial things that they want to say, leave it out for the world, go public with it immediately, and then say, hey, everybody, I want you to respond, react, comment, and let me know what you think. That is the exact opposite of what is happening here. Jesus is about to make arguably his most controversial statement in the Bible, but he doesn't begin with controversy, he begins with comfort. He says, let not your hearts be troubled. If your heart is troubled this morning about anything, if your heart is heavy this morning, Jesus has a comforting word for you. He gives his disciples the promise of comfort, which ultimately leads to the promise of heaven. Now, the context here is really important. We have to understand why he's saying this in the midst of saying something extremely, extremely controversial. John chapter 14 is in the early parts of the upper room discourse. This is the last night Jesus is hanging out with his disciples. They're going to have the Last Supper together. The upper room discourse starts from about midway through John 13 and goes up until about John chapter 17. Right before this, in the previous section, Jesus has told his disciples, and this is really him, like, imagine you're about to die and you're bringing the people who are closest to you in close, and you're giving them everything you want them to know before you leave. In the previous chapter, he's told them, hey, one of you are going to betray me. And he tells them, I'm going to be betrayed. And then Judas gets up and then leaves. He then tells Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows twice. And then on top of that, he says, I am going to a place that you cannot come yet. If you're in the disciples' shoes, you're thinking, I've been rolling with you and rocking with you for 3 years. I've been following you, going where you go, doing what you do. And you are telling me, if I get this, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're telling me you're about to be betrayed and you're about to leave. I signed up to follow you, but now you're going to leave me. How do you think his disciples would have been feeling in the moment? How do you think you would have been feeling in the moment? Trouble. Yet Jesus steps into the very real and raw emotions they are experiencing in the moment and says, let not your heart be troubled, which means he acknowledges how they feel in the moment, but he also provides a solution for their trouble. He says, believe in God, believe also in me. In other words, the answer to a troubled heart is a trusting heart. The answer to a troubled heart is a trusting heart. Is anything troubling you today? Maybe the better question is, what is troubling you today? Sometimes you can be troubled because of trial. Pain and suffering is coming at you at all sides. Other times you could be feeling troubled in your heart because of tribulation. That's kind of like trial, but it often includes more anxiety and more worry. Sometimes you could be experiencing trouble in your heart because you're being tested, which is a catchphrase for everything that you are experiencing. Regardless of what may be troubling your heart, Jesus says, turn to him, and he will invite you to transform your trouble into trust. He says, believe in me. That means you have to take your trouble to Jesus. Say, Jesus, I am trusting you with the troubles of my heart, and I am asking that you would take my trouble, take my pain, give me your peace. Jesus, it's an exchange. This isn't, when you say, Lord, I want to cast my burdens on you, I want to give you my trouble, this isn't theoretical. This isn't just something that's nice to say. Jesus is like, I've been waiting for you to give me your trouble. I've been waiting for you to give me the things that are burdening you, things that are heavy for you. You give it to me so I can give you my peace. A few chapters later in John 16, Jesus says, in this world you will have trouble. In this world you will have tribulation. Then he says, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. And right before that, he connects it to peace because he says, I have said these things to you so that in me you may have peace. Peter, in 1 Peter 5:7, he says, cast all your cares, all your anxieties upon him, knowing that he cares for you. When he says cast all your anxieties, that means everything. Not just some of the things that are plaguing you, but all of the things that are plaguing you. It means not just your trouble, but ultimately your life. The word that he uses there for casting literally means to hurl or to throw. It's like being on a boat and anchoring the boat, and then you're carrying the anchor out of the boat and you're tossing it into the water. Jesus says, toss your trouble and your trial into the water of my hands and my grace. And that whole idea of casting your cares or your burdens on him, that's not a one-time thing. That's something you do over. How often are you, I don't know about you, I've been troubled more than once today. I've been troubled more than once this week. We often think, I got a verse, I'm good, I said it. No, this is an understanding of doing it over and over and over. You're taking the trouble that is weighing you down, that is so heavy, and you are constantly giving it to him. Giving it to him. Let me see if I can make this plain. When I was a kid, I used to love watching the World's Strongest Man competitions. I mean, I know now we got CrossFit games and all the other stuff, but I love watching the World's Strongest Man competitions because you see these guys, you know, big mammoth-looking dudes got the belt attached to an airplane or a massive semi-truck, and they're, or the Atlas, you know, the Atlas throw where they're taking these big Atlas stones and they're carrying it. Big, massive dudes, right? I'm like, man, Lord, you build some people different. Now, my favorite event was the tire throwing flipping contest. You see these guys, massive dudes. They would get down. They have these big, massive tire that's about 800 to 1,000 pounds. So think about that's a 1,000-pound tire. And what do? They bend down real low, they pick it up, and they hurl it over and they flip it. But the whole point is you have to get from where you are to where you're going. So you got to keep doing it over again. You got to keep getting down, and you got to keep flipping it. You got to keep getting down, and you got to keep flipping it. Jesus is saying, I want you to keep getting down and keep flipping over the trouble of your heart into the arms of my grace. Bring it to flip in the same way they have to flip that thing over and over and over again. He says, don't stop flipping your trouble over to me. Bring it to me because I know exactly what to do with it. Whatever your heart is troubled with and however many troubles it may experience, flip it over to Jesus and keep flipping it over to him over and over again until your soul is saturated in his peace. Now, if mentally you need peace because your mind is troubled, or if physically you need peace because your body is troubled, or professionally you need peace because your career is troubled, or relationally you need peace because your family or your friendships are troubled, Jesus says, come into the marketplace of the Messiah where you can exchange your trouble for trust. Like, you can't hold on to your trouble and hold on to him at the same time. He says, you got to let one go in order to hold on to the other. He says, believe in me. Now, we don't have time to get through this because I'm ruthlessly committed to finishing this sermon early so that all the nice things I said for the parents, they'll be happier. And they're like, oh man, service ended 20 minutes early. So I don't have time to go into this as much as I want to, but it's interesting that in John chapter 12, earlier in verse 27, Jesus said himself that he was troubled. He said, my soul is troubled. And yet he's telling them, don't be troubled. Like, hold on, wait a minute, Jesus. You just told us your soul is troubled, and he tells them that because he knows what he's about to do. He's about to go and take their greatest trouble, all the troubles that are troubling them. He's going to make their troubles his troubles. And he's looking at them moments before he's about to go and take all the trouble on himself on the cross. And he says, basically, listen, ain't no reason for us both to be troubled. I'm prepared for my trouble. I signed up for this. I'm prepared for this. You give me I am going to take all the trouble that is troubling you and die for your trouble so that you can live a life not burdened with trouble eternally. He's basically saying, he can tell them as somebody who is troubled, give it to me because I can actually do something. What are you going to do with your trouble? Most of us, when we're troubled, we just get more troubled. Our heart gets more heavy. We are out of sight, we're not locked into the things we need to be, and we have more anxiety and more worry. Jesus says, listen, I can handle the trouble, and I'm about to handle the trouble. You don't know what to do with it, so give it to me. He promises peace in the midst of their troubles. Second thing, before we move on to the second point, second thing that he also promises them, he says, the reason why I want you to give me your trouble is not only to receive my peace, but it's to point to the hope that will outlast every trouble you will ever experience in the hope of heaven. He says, in my Father's house, there are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go and prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. These verses are often read at funerals, and rightfully so, because Jesus is talking about heaven as our true and forever home. Now, to be sure, there's a bunch of stuff about heaven that we don't know. But there are some things that we do know, and here specifically, Jesus outlines some things that I think we shouldn't sleep on. And I'm going to just go through these really, really quickly that I want to highlight. Number one, he says heaven is a home, in my Father's house. When most people think about home, they think about family, they think about warmth, they think about love. He says, Jesus is saying heaven is a home because it's God's house, and he's a father who loves you. And secondly, it's not just a home, but it's a home with many rooms. He says there are many, in other words, Jesus is saying, in heaven, in my Father's house, There is plenty of space for you. He says, my Father's house has many rooms. Depending on your translation, it may say many mansions. And the whole idea that he's trying to get across is that heaven, in a sense, is inclusive in the sense that anyone is welcome, no matter where they're from, what they've done. He could have said, there are a bajillion rooms in my Father's house. But he just says there's many. As a reminder, is the way that David Mathis puts it, God has a big house because God has a big heart. It's an invitation. He's saying, listen, heaven is a real place. It's a home where you want to be, not a home that you dread going in the holidays. It's a home that has lots of space, not just for people in general, but for you in particular. But then he says, heaven is inclusive in the sense that anyone who wants to come can go, but there's a caveat. It's invite only. It's invite only because Jesus says, I have to go and prepare a place for you, but you also need to be escorted in. Because he says, quote, I will take you there. So if you're thinking you're going to get into heaven on your own merits, if you're thinking you're going to get to heaven on your performance, your religious performance, or anything other than being escorted by God himself, you're in deep trouble. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about living in downtown LA because I like the taxes in my state. However, if I decided I want to live in LA and I want to try to get into one of them really, posh, super exclusive restaurants, the ones, I just found out this, there are restaurants where you, like an individual, can own a permanent reservation for the table. So even if they don't show up, it's theirs. If I try to get into one of those places, one deep by myself, I just pull up like a place where you need a reservation months in advance. And I just pull up like, yo, what's up? I'm trying to get a seat at, this table. The host is going to look at me crazy. They may not say this explicitly, but what they're thinking is, who are you? You come in here by yourself thinking you can come into the most exclusive restaurant in this city and just pull up. Even if the table is open for you, you can't get in there. I guarantee you, if I show up to that same place, walking in with LeBron James on my right and Denzel Washington on my left, I'm getting in that place. Why? Because of who's with me. Or better yet, because of who I'm with. Jesus says the only way you're getting into heaven is if you think you're getting in there because of what you've done or how well you've read your Bible or how hard you prayed, you're going to get up there and Gabriel's going to look at you like, who is you? You coming up here by yourself? You need an invitation that has been sent to me before you got here, and you need to be escorted by the home resident owner who lives here. And if that's not happening, you're not getting in. Jesus says, I will go prepare a place for you, then I'm going to come back and take you there. It's a promise that he will come again. It says, do you believe that? Do you believe that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord? Do you believe that what you will be cannot even be compared to what you are now? Throughout this weekend, I've been thinking a lot about this. I said, man, this may be true of you, but in my life, I don't think I talk enough about heaven. I definitely don't. I thought about preaching about heaven last year, but then I was like, nah, we're going to do something else. And then I was like, why is that? I remember teaching a class at a church and about systematic theology, and then we got to the end times, eschatology, Jesus coming back. And I remember telling them, honestly, because I was like, yo, I know Jesus is coming back. I know it could come anytime, any day, any hour, but functionally, I really want to be like, Jesus, there's some stuff I want to do before you come back. At that time, I was like, yo, I made sure I paid a lot of money for this wedding, so hold off. Let me just get over August. You can come back. And then she was praying and I said, okay, Lord, let Ezra come through. All good, 10 toes, 10. We good? Then you can come. But then I realized I love this world more than I love the idea of being with him. When I'm at the barbershop, I'm not talking about heaven. I'm usually talking about whatever is on the TV, church. Like when I'm not talking about heaven. And oftentimes it's because I don't think I really long to be there. Oftentimes we want to curate and manufacture a life on earth that brings heaven. Like we want to create our own heaven. And we're always so we do, we want to get more of this, more of that. We want heaven on earth. And Jesus is saying explicitly, like, There's nothing wrong with doing everything you can to build a life here that honors the Lord, that takes care of all, but he reminds you, I am taking you to a place that's not here. Think, pray, build a life that looks like this is not your true eternal home. I was telling this to some people who came over our house over the weekend. I was like, I like going to weddings, I like going to funerals only because that's the only time I'm reminded I'm going to be there. It's going to be my open casket. Those are usually, I'm not thinking about, man, what is my future going to be like when I'm not here anymore? What am I preparing for? Are the decisions that I'm making with my money looks like Jesus is my treasure and not me as much? Or am I forgiving people knowing that I've been forgiven much and I'm going to be received and welcomed by God who's forgiven me? Am I thinking about what is it going to look like when the blazing glory of the Son of God is beaming in my face with joy and radiance, and everything I gave my life for is now my faith has become sight? Am I thinking, do I delight in that? I'll tell you right now, I usually don't. I'm usually delighting about, man, this electricity bill keep rolling up. I'm usually thinking about, man, gas keep going up. When is the Fed going to pull the interest rates down so I can, try and level up my side hustles and my third hustles and my fourth hustles? I'm thinking, I know all you all are heavenly minded. Your boy is thinking about, Lord, I'm trying to make heaven here now. And Jesus is like, the reason why you're always frustrated is because you're forgetting I'm taking you someplace. But it's not here. The great C.S. Lewis has this great quote. You may have heard it before. It says, he says, if you read history, you will find that the Christians who did the most for the present world were precisely those who thought the most about the next. What do you think the most about? Listen, everybody makes promises, but not everybody keeps promises. And even those of us who keep promises don't keep them all the time. But when Jesus makes a promise, you better believe that a promise made is a promise kept. So when he promises peace for your trouble, you can bank on that. And when he promises heaven as your home, you can bank on that. But there's one caveat. He says, I'm going to take you to a place, but there's only one way to get there, through him. We see that in our second point. Believe in the exclusivity of Jesus. He says this in verses 4-6, and you know the way to where I'm going. So funny. Thomas said, Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. We've now come to the most controversial statement, arguably, that Jesus has made and probably will make. For many, this is the reason why they really don't fool with Christianity and why they really don't want to rock with Jesus, because they don't like what Jesus says. Now, here's the reality. This is one of the 7 I am statements that Jesus gives in John's gospel. He says, I am the door, or the sheep gate for the sheep. He says, I am the bread of life. He tells Mary and Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. He says, I am the true vine. He says over and over, I am the light of the world. And now here he's dropping a gem that drops everybody's jaw by saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus doesn't stutter or he doesn't stumble. He says the only way to the Father is through me. Some of the most common pushback that people give with this claim that Jesus makes here in verse 6 is that they may say, I believe in God, but I'm just not down with Jesus, which basically means you don't believe in God. Which, let me run that back, which explicitly means you don't believe in God. When someone says, I believe in God, but I don't really believe in Jesus, that's a massive contradiction in terms. It is foreign to the Bible to say, I believe in God, but I don't believe in Jesus, because Jesus is saying, number one, I am God, and the only way to the Father is through me. So the beautiful picture that he painted about, I'm going to give you an invite, I'm going to give you an escort, I'm going to come and get you. If you don't believe in him, you're not going there. He says, the only way is through me. The only way you can't have God unless you have Jesus. If I told you, if you went down to, northern Washington and had a great lunch with Bill Gates and I asked you how to go, you said, man, it was great. I like Bill, but I don't really like Gates. I'd be like, that makes no sense. No sense. If you went down to New Ailey Center and you started playing tennis and Serena Williams came up there and she's like, hey, let's go around. I'm like, oh my God, how was it playing with Serena? Like, I like Serena, I don't really like Williams. As wild as that sounds, as crazy as it is when people say, I love God, I have a relationship with God, I just don't fool with Jesus. Where do they do that at? Makes no sense at all. He says, you can't have one without the other. Jesus says he's the only way to God because he is God. Remember back in verse 1, he says, if you believe in God, believe also in me. Like, I slipped, I walked right past it, but he was just saying, you guys are Jews. You've been following Yahweh. You know the Old Testament. No Jew would say, oh, I don't believe in God. Jesus is saying, let's level up the troubled heart you're having. Let's level up your belief. If you believe in God, praise him that you do. Then you need to also believe in me. We are one and the same. Another objection that people say is, all the religions, like they're all the same. Be a good person, treat people the way you want to be treated, golden rule. They all have some kind of reward for afterlife. Number one, I would look into that because they all have different versions of what that quote unquote reward is. Some of them believe you're going to come back as an ant. Some of them have a bunch of different stuff. So number one, I would say you need to double check all religions ends up the same place. But then secondly, Christianity stands in stark difference and contrast to every other world religion. If you take the founder, like any origin story, it doesn't matter what it is. If you take the founder out of it, if you take Muhammad out, if you take Krishna out, what do you have? You still got that religion. With Islam, if you take Muhammad out of Islam, you still got the 5 pillars. So because it's all the things that you have to do. If what makes Buddhism is following the Eightfold Path. If you take Jesus out of Christianity, you know what you're left with? Nothing at all. Because he's not just all those other teachers and founders, quote unquote, they are dispensing and teaching a body of truth, which if they're not there, you can keep teaching and living, praying the prayers, doing. Jesus says, I'm not here just as a teacher of truth. I am the truth. So if I'm not here, this is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15 that we read in the resurrection on Easter. If Jesus didn't die for your sins and resurrect, then your hope is in vain. You're the most to be pitied, all those things. But Jesus is like, listen, I'm not just I was listening to this guy talk about he turned 33, so he said, I'm in my Jesus year. But he was rocking for the Nation of Islam. And he's like, I like Jesus. He says some really dope stuff. There's some bars in there that can use to benefit your life. And in my head, I'm thinking, bro, that's not the way it works. You can't have God if you don't have him. You may have a disagreement about what I believe about the Nephilim in Genesis. You may have a disagreement about when the end times is coming. Is it coming pre-trib, post-trib? You may think that the way in which our church is structured is not correct with elders and deacons. If you have an issue with Jesus, you don't have God at all. He is saying, I am the way and the truth and the life. I'm the only way. And that I am statement, in every Jew's mind, they would have been thinking, wait a minute, hold on, time out. The only person they'd be talking about I am was when Moses was standing, he was standing and got in that burning bush that wasn't inflamed. And God said, he says, yo, who am I going to tell? I got to go back to where I committed murder and come back after being gone all those years and be like, hey guys, surprise, I'm back. I know I got a criminal felony on my head, but God told me it's time to liberate y'all and let y'all free. And then he says, God, they know who I am. What should I say to them to tell them on whose authority is sending me to come back to the place of my greatest sin? He says, tell them I am sent you. Tell them that the great I am sent you. When Jesus is saying I am, Jesus is saying, I know y'all know that story of Moses in the Old Testament, and I'm not dodging from the question, and I'm not dodging from the statement I'm making. I'm standing 10 toes on it. Jesus is saying, that I am that Moses was looking to, I am. Our problem in the world that we live in is because we want to be we live in a pluralistic society, which basically means we view religion like a Chinese buffet my family used to go to after church. It's like, oh, I want that. I don't want the egg rolls, but I'm going to take the spinach, or I'm going to just go straight to the ice cream. You pick what you want, and then you let go what you don't want. Jesus says, when it comes to my restaurant, there's only one thing on the menu, and that's me. And you're not eating unless you have me. There is no, we'll take a little bit of, because first of all, it's intellectually just dishonest to say, well, I'll take a little bit of this and I'll take a little bit of that and we can all work together. If one of those things on your plate says, I can't be with anything else on here. People will say, I like Jesus, just like the Nation of Islam guy that I was watching the video of. He would say, Jesus says some dope stuff. And, love your neighbor, care for the poor, look after those who are down. It's all about love. And they will say, I like those things that Jesus says. But then you'll get to John 14:6 says, I don't like that. And my thing is always, you can't pick and choose what he says that you like. So when he's talking about caring for the poor, when he's talking about love, when he's talking about being your shelter, being your refuge, when he's talking about being your good shepherd, it's like, oh, I love that. That makes me feel good. But when he says, I want you to know that I'm the only way you're getting to the Father, that's too exclusive. But I would remind you that Jesus' exclusive promise is really an inclusive exclusivity. What do I mean by that? Remember, he said, my Father's house got many rooms. Inclusive. But there's only one way to the house. Exclusive. Anybody from any background, Revelation chapter 7 says, heaven will be populated with every tongue, tribe, nation. That's inclusive.